Man, I don't know how you Christians can be okay with God committing mass genocide in the Bible.
Ah, yes, this is one of the most popular objections to God's morality.
Yeah, I mean, the flood story, women, children, even women who were pregnant were all drowned because this God took it upon himself to wipe out the human race. That is, all except Noah and his family. So how do you square that with a God who is supposed to be a moral, all-loving being?
Well, let me start by asking you this. If a judge sentences a bank robber to prison, do you think that judge is doing this out of a lack of love?
No, I don't think emotion has anything to do with it. He broke the law and is paying for it with prison time.
Right, so the judge is carrying out justice.
Sure.
Okay, so my next question is, do you think any human being has the ability to not sin against God's standard of perfection?
Well, how perfect are we talking here?
Complete holiness of thought, word, and deed. So no lying, stealing, lust, etc.
Well, maybe when we're babies, and even small children that don't comprehend right and wrong.
Right, but you agree that when we do reach that age of accountability, that all of us will most definitely fail in the area of being as perfect as a holy God.
Sure.
Okay, so here's the thing. God is perfect in love, but he's also perfectly just. If we saw a judge today let a criminal off scot-free, we'd even go as far as assuming that judge was paid off and was corrupt.
Yeah, it's true.
So God, being perfect in his justice, has to apply his standard to each of us fully. And to fully apply his judgment is separation from himself. Because he's holy, he can't attach himself to anything that is unholy. We know this better as a place called hell.
Right.
So Jesus was God's solution for this. He was the man that took our crimes against God's standard and pegged them on his own back so death could swallow him instead. Through Christ paying that price for us, we can now wear Christ's robe of righteousness and enter into where God is with boldness because it's not about what's underneath the robe anymore. We've been covered.
Okay, so how does this all tie into God committing genocide?
Well, now that you understand sin and how God deals with it, I think you can now see that God is perfectly loving and was able to be perfectly just because he brought the hammer down on his own son. That way we didn't have to be crushed under his perfect judgment.
Yes.
So when we turn to an example like the flood story, we have to ask, does God owe humanity anything?
Well, I see what you're getting at. These humans were already guilty and under judgment for violating his perfect standard. So I'm assuming you're going to say that they rightly deserve death. But I'm still thinking that's pretty brutal of a punishment, and we still have innocent children and unborn babies to answer for here.
Right, well, again, death, suffering, sickness, disease, these are all results of the fall of man. When God's perfection is extracted, things decay and fall apart.
Okay.
So death is the end result of rejecting God. In God, there's life. Without him, it leads to death. So when you say death seems too brutal, death is just the result of rejecting God. There's no life without God, and without life,
You're dead.
Exactly. As for babies and children being swept away in God's judgment, we need to go back to that thought of the age of accountability. There's a good biblical basis for babies and children going to heaven when they die.
Okay.
So think about this. If God exists, these babies don't die. They just change location. They're forever in God's presence, which to us may seem cruel, but again, if God is real, this is the best place they can ever be. In fact, if God does exist, it'd be merciful if he wiped us all out as babies so that we wouldn't violate his laws and head toward death. Don't you agree?
Well, I don't know. It just all seems so tyrannical.
Oh, believe me, if we were talking about a human being that was ordering the death of millions in this way, I'd be right beside you saying it isn't right.
Right.
But we're talking about God, the author of life. We can't comprehend the perspective he has. He knows the ripple effects of every action that is ever made. He knows the amount of good that will be produced in someone's life and the bad.
Okay.
Murder is wrong for us because we're not God. We don't have the perspective he has to influence humanity to bring about the greatest good for all of time. Some people think they have that perspective, but they're psychos. Now, no one has all the answers as to why God does what he does. As Job figured out, even when he tried questioning God on his morality, he quickly learned that his brain was too small to compute God's sovereignty. It's like us trying to teach a spider mathematics.
It's just so much to try to understand.
Well, again, we don't have to understand. We learn what we can with what has been given to us through the Bible, and through that, we develop a trust in this God, who we can't understand completely, but someone who revealed himself in the most loving way, death on the cross for our sins, and that is something we can comprehend and put our trust in. Put it this way, any God who leaves the majesty and perfection of his own throne, humbles himself as a baby born in a barn, experiences human temptations, overcomes them by living sinless, and then willingly dies the most painful and humiliating death so that those who are crucifying him can be saved, that's the God that I trust.